Hi, I'm Joe Rourke. We've received a ton of positive feedback on the performance dashboard since we released them last June. But we also get a bunch of questions from IT service providers. Questions like, how'd you do that in Excel? And what can I do to modify my own dashboards? And do you have any advice or strategies on how to make dashboards for my own clients? So we put together this video to outline the 7 strategies for building awesome Excel dashboards. I'll step through our actual dashboards and show you the formula that we've used. Now, for our 5,200 IT service providers, we believe there's a tremendous opportunity to bring business intelligence down to their end clients, a total of 2 million end clients. So whether you're a business owner who's interested in what needs to be done to create great dashboards, or you're on the technical side and you're interested in how to build them, you'll find some great information here. So you'll be seeing some of the actual Autotask dashboards. Autotask has a portfolio of dashboards, including a service weekly executive view, a service daily manager view, a client executive report dashboard, a sales dashboard on closed deals and forecasting, a full financial dashboard, and our newest dashboard for project portfolio. So our first strategy is full visibility. Now, with full visibility, we believe that you need a portfolio of graphs that tells the story of your business. With most business intelligence tools, you first need to figure out what you want to track and then configure all of your trending charts. Let's take a look at how workbooks handles this. This service workbook is pre-populated with 50 charts specifically chosen to drive business intelligence. So let's take a look at just 5 of the charts. We'll start out with a new, completed, and opening backlog. You can tell immediately that my backlog is trending upwards. And you can see that the problem is there's an increase in new tickets because we're closing at a constant level. But it's also important to look at the age of the opening backlog. And this shows that my older backlog of tickets are increasing by about 50% over the last 30 days. And there are problems brewing here. I can also see the week-to-week changes in backlog. This gives me a good feel about volume. I can see information about completed tickets, new tickets, tickets by group. But what about performance? This company has very good first response, but you can see a small dip in hitting resolution targets over the last couple of weeks. It makes sense we're getting more tickets. So how quickly are we responding? Here we see the average first response in business hours. Here you see a spike, but as important, you also see the distribution of responses, and you can see that there are 23 responses that took over 2 hours in the previous week. We see a nice trend in terms of elapsed time to respond, but also we know that our aging backlog may eventually catch up with us. And finally, we look at what customers are saying. We had a dip 2 weeks ago, and 4 clients gave us under 3. This is the power of a portfolio of trend charts. So what's some of the secret sauce here? First, an easy tip on presentation. One of the things that you want to do is deactivate grid lines and headlines in terms of what you're presenting. It gives you a nice clean presentation and it makes a big difference. You also want to collapse your top navigation. All this makes a presentation capability in terms of your workbooks a lot more polished. Each of the trend charts is driven by data on the Analysis tab. So let's go over to the Financial Workbook and take a look at the data analysis. This is an Excel table with calculated results from a raw data table, which is on a hidden tab. Now, one of the things you'll see is that we use primarily SUMIF and COUNTIFs to aggregate data for specified criteria over specified time frames. The calculations use criteria fields that the user can change. This is also where users can enter in additional data like additional revenue or additional cost of goods, and also enter in their plan numbers. Now, one of my CEO's favorite features is the Sparkline capability that shows the trending, both on the data table, but also on our Metrics That Matter screen. Now let's see how this Analysis tab drives the financial trending. On the financial trending chart, you'll actually see information about individual revenue targets per month and cumulative to plan. We provide information in terms of revenue, distribution of revenues, average revenue per client. We also break down top accounts by revenue, give breakdowns in terms of cost of goods sold, gross margin analysis, information regarding the year-to-date top accounts by gross margin, and probably more importantly, the bottom ones by gross margin. We also provide all this information in a year-over-year comparison so you can see how the current fiscal year compared to the previous fiscal year. Now let's take a quick look at sales. The sales workbook has trending in terms of monthly revenue trends, one-time revenue trends, average age to close, information regarding breakdowns in terms of cost information and gross margin. You also get the same year-over-year comparisons to do it. Now, you probably already have a good feel about how the company is trending, but it's also important to understand where the business is right now. And for that, we focus in on snapshot views. We provide snapshot views for the business that was closed last month, the business that was closed this month, and also what is currently forecasted for the current month. And these screens are actually focused in and use pivot charts. We use the same approach to provide service backlog analysis that shows 10 charts on all open service tickets. Now, a couple of tips. I like to only display the pivot charts and keep the underlying pivot tables in a hidden tab. So one of the things you'll want to do is just use a unhide. You can actually see hidden tabs that actually contain your pivot tables. Now, you should also consider snapshot time views. These allow you to graphically show what's occurring over a specified period of time. We'll switch over to the service weekly workbook and take a look at the weekly time view. The weekly time view allows you to take a look at individual graphs for a specified week. And I can specify which week I want to look at, and all of my charts will change and show me what was happening for that specific week. One of the things we're doing here is that these individual values are using index calculations to actually pick out the proper value out of your data analysis tab. Each one of the charts are using offset functionality, similarly based on what the index value field is in the ticket balance selector. Now, we used a similar approach on our gauge form for financial gauges. The financial gauges forms allows me to select an individual month or use a pull-down selector to choose the month that I want to see. Each one of the gauges shows me the actual versus plan number that I had for whatever specific value I had indicated. We also provided the capability for them to customize the individual values that they wanted to see. So if I wanted to show, in this case, a chart that went to 150%, you can actually see that my charting has changed and gave me up to 150%. I can also select what value I want to display. One of the secrets for these gauge charts is they're actually a combination of a pie chart to give you the actual indicator and a donut chart that actually shows you the actual arc of information. And then what you use is you hide out the actual remaining pieces of the information below it. Now, we now have visibility, but what about key performance metrics? Now, the second strategy is metrics that matter. One of the things you want is you want an at-a-glance view of all of your performance metrics to see whether you're on plan or not on plan. So let's take a look at how Autotask provides this. So the Service Metrics that Matter screen shows you an at-a-glance view of performance against key metrics that you choose from the Data tab. We see how we performed over the last 3 weeks for service. We see a 10-week trend using a Sparkline capability. We also see which weeks met or missed the plan and our overall target. We also, through conditional formatting, show an indicator of what values actually missed plan and when. So I instantaneously, at a glance, see that there were a problem 2 weeks ago with the elapsed time to resolve and the average service score, but it's been okay since then. I also know that this week I had a problem with the opening critical and high tickets. Let's take a look at how we use the same information on our Financial tab. Here we're seeing financial information like revenue, cost of goods, but we're seeing a current selected month that changed from the previous month in our year-to-date values. Because really when you're looking at revenue, you're always thinking about how did I do in a specific month, how did I do year-to-date to that month, also what my month trend was and my planned month values have. Here we put in a selector since it isn't a time base from the current date back, it's a selected month that I want to look at. So you can choose a specific month, you'll see the month, and again we use the conditional formatting, we use the spark lines, we also use an indicator about whether or not in terms of conditional you actually had a change that was positive, negative, or it stayed the same. Now, one of my favorite parts of the workbooks is how you can easily explore data through explore screens. One of the things about Explore screens is it tells you the why of what happened. It allows you to understand the causes and effects so you can make changes to your process, changes to what you're doing to have a more positive business outcome. Let's take a look. The Service Explore screen allows you to analyze all of your service tickets over the past 10 weeks, in this case over 8,000 service tickets, and you can explore the data, that data, through 16 charts in the main body area that get filtered by the surrounding slicers at the top and along the side. Let's take a look at completed, critical and high, and we'll focus in on Europe. One thing you'll see is that all of the individual charts are getting filtered by the data, and I can take a look and see when they're coming in, by what type of source. I can see top 10 by the create date and top 10 by the create day. One of the things is when you have a lot of data, it's really kind of interesting to see what is most significant. So that's why we use a lot of the top 5 charts. I can see the top 5 ticket statuses. In this case, they're all complete. The top 5 issue types, they're all for the group Europe. I can look at who's got which resources actually have the tickets. In this case, Jacob has 20 of them. I can look at the queues associated with the product queue. I can look at sub-issue types. I can drill into and take a look at first response resolution tickets. I even see who the top 15 clients are that have completed critical and high tickets for Europe. We also add, as a pivot table, information regarding the actual tickets that actually represent all the data in those charts, with a ticket number that you can drill in and get further details within Autotask. Now suppose you're interested in first response for the Americas. Well, there's a filter in terms of first response, so I can say where did I fail for the Americas. And this will indicate that there are 330 tickets where I failed first response. Let's look at the usual culprits for first response: resource, create times, and sources. So one thing you want to do is you want to take a look at which are the resources that aren't responding in a reasonable amount of time. Jacob. You want to look at when were the tickets created. So I can look at the create date and time and say it's Monday at 4 o'clock, and I typically can't get to the tickets in a reasonable amount of time. Or you can actually look at the source. And what you can find is that although most of our tickets were coming from the client portal, email, when it comes in via email, that's not being responded to based on my SLA criteria. Now let's turn off first response and take a look at where we're failing on the resolve. Now it's interesting, we still have a high rating when we actually fail to resolve tickets. What you'd be looking at here is typically the types of tickets. You'll typically have an issue when a specific type of problem that you're not getting resolved. You want to take a look at the resource that's being involved with it. It may be a training issue, it may be a process issue. Finally, one of the things I want to do is take a look at surveys. And oftentimes for surveys, one of the things you want to drill into and take a look at is where do I have low surveys, but also where do I have high surveys. If I'm getting a number of high surveys in terms of settings between 4 and 5 out of 5, that's an indication that someone might be a reference account. You want to take a look at the information and see who is it that's actually giving me the most 4s and 5s. I can take a look at the individual resource and actually drill into that account. This is the power that slicers give you to get a feel for what's going on with your system and understand the why of when you're having problems. Each workbook has explore screens. In the case of sales, you have a forecast tab that allows you to drill into relevant information, even dollar ranges of deals that you want to look at, and look at the corresponding charts that tell you information about what's going on in terms of the individual deals. You can also take a look at closed, and if you want to look at historically when have we closed, who has closed the most deals, you can go in and take a look at the data in terms of closed deals and ranges, and understand whether or not the number of users or user fees or who the top sales reps were by revenue account. For financial workbook, it's all about exploring revenue, cost of goods, and gross margins, where you can actually drill into specific contract types or categories and see relevant information regarding the revenue cost per quarter, distribution by contract type, distribution by contract category, indications of who your top clients were by revenue, by margin, by percent margin, and again, always getting the information associated with the individual contracts below. In terms of financials, you'll also want to focus in on utilization. Utilization of your resources, being able to drill into an individual resource or type of time or labor or an individual work type and see what's going on over time or a specific time period. Understanding how people are spending their time and getting the most efficient use out of your resources is one of the key factors for any business success. Now the next strategy is to be able to easily allow your users to change criteria. This is needed for any type of self-service business intelligence. So let's take a look at how end clients can go in and configure the analysis, change the analysis for their own needs. Let's look at the financial workbook to see how you can configure data on the financial analysis tab. A good place to start is to talk about the metrics that matter section. The metrics that matter section, which drives the metrics that matter page, are simply references to calculated data within the spreadsheet. So you can kind of see here, we've actually said recurring service revenue, and we just referenced down the recurring service revenue calculation. Down below, in terms of each one of the calculations here are actually using your COUNTIF and your SUMIF calculations to calculate. But the ones at the top, which are metrics that matter, are simply references back. So if I wanted to change this to say, and I wanted to say maybe rather than this, I wanted to use fixed price contracts, I can change this field, make it 44. And then what I would simply do is go across for 44 and actually change this for the various columns. And what you'll see is I'll change all the values. I would also change the reference to be fixed service revenue. I would have, of course, copied that field all the way across. And now my metrics that matter section would have fixed service revenue. And this would be percentage of fixed service revenue. Likewise, you'll see is that the year-to-date metrics are automatically changing. And if I went over to my metrics that matter screen, now I have fixed service revenue, and if I chose one of the early months of the year, I'd actually see the actual values that we had for fixed service. There's a $70,000. One of the things that other people are often going to be doing is also changing your targets. And for revenue, one of the things next to all the data that's coming directly in from Autotask, you can set your targets and indicate whether or not your target is to be above or below a certain target. In the case of cost of goods sold, you'd always want to be under a threshold, where in terms of revenue you want to be over it. And then you set your actual revenue targets for the plan. So everything in green here is actually data that you enter in, and you can enter in any of your targets, and this is used for your line charts, but up here it's also used for all of your calculations on your metrics that matter screen, in addition to whether you met plan or missed plan for specific months. So oftentimes one of the things you want to do is you're going to want to change the criteria that's used for a lot of your distribution charts and your revenue trends. If we go over to the revenue trends, one of the things you'll see is that we often use distribution charts to actually show, rather than just the average or a count of information, the range of the data. Like this revenue distribution chart that actually shows that we're moving up market. You're seeing that the number of clients that have over 10,000 has been growing over time, and the number of accounts between 3 and 10,000 are growing over time. But every organization is different, and they're going to want to change what the distribution criteria happens to be. You do that on your analysis tab. One of the things we're going to do is move down to the revenue analysis section, and I'll open up using the criteria window, which unhides via macro several columns, which criteria 1, 2, and 3. And you can kind of see here for revenue ranges that you were seeing before, you can specify what the actual dollar counts should be used. So in this case, if I wanted to, and I'll just move across and so you can see the data here, as I change the criteria columns, and I change this from maybe 1 to 2000, and I change this from 2001, and I can also change this to, of course, I want to change my label to 2000, and I want to change this label to 2000. And by changing the data here, I change my numbers, but I will also change the information that's presented on my financial trend. And now I get a better look at that kind of distribution by making those changes. That's how easy it is to change the distribution information. So those are 3 of the types of things that typically people want to change. The metrics that matter, what's being displayed for those, what my key targets in terms of my targets for plan numbers. They may also, in this case, want to put in information associated with additional data. It's one of the powers of using Excel is it's not just the information that's being aggregated from a database. And you want to change the criteria and make the criteria your own. Those 3 things represent the bulk of what people want to do in terms of configuration. There's also the capability of changing the values that appear in slicer functionality by changing the actual calculated columns in the raw data table. Now you've seen a ton of trending, you've seen the cool Explore screen. Most business intelligence tools are hard to set up. You really need to be easy to set up, and in fact for Autotask workbooks we've set it up so that it can set up in minutes rather than days. We need to scale out to thousands of IT service providers. So let's take a look at the process. Each workbook has a config tab, and on the config tab you can choose to configure your workbook. When you choose to set up workbook, you're presented with the connection setup screen that allows you to enter in your Autotask report data warehouse credentials, the server name, the database name, the user ID, and the password. We also provide the capability of entering in advanced where clauses where you can modify the SQL statement that's being used to download data and then filter out. So oftentimes people will only retrieve data for certain lines of businesses or certain resources, certain queues. We also give the ability of saving passwords. So basically you can save the password with the connection string. We always recommend that people protect the workbook if they're going to be doing that because it's in clear text. Now when you choose to actually do the setup, it reads your site configuration information. And in the case of Service Desk, it would get your priorities, your issue types, your sources, all the attributes of your tickets, and it imprints your configuration on the workbook, right on that analysis tab that you saw before where it could manually change the criteria. It then downloads all of the data, all the ticket data or all the revenue data, and it builds out your graphic dashboards. It takes under 2 minutes in terms of it to completely set up the workbook for your initial use. In terms of some other setup information, things like company name, currency symbol, fiscal year and month, your advanced where clauses. The Service Desk will also have your time zone information that you can enter, grouping level information about how you want to group information, all part of the initial configuration screen. The next strategy is having an easy one-click refresh. You don't want your users to have understanding of data connections or go through a complicated process, just a simple button that refreshes. And that refresh needs to be quick. With Autotask, what you'll see is that it's actually under a minute to refresh all of its data. We like to say, give us 1 minute and you'll see your business in a new way. Every workbook has a refresh data button. When you click the refresh data button, one of the things you'll do is you'll get a prompt, and the prompt will be for the password if you're not currently saving passwords. This password will be used for all of your data connection strings that you may be using and for downloading the information. I can always choose to save the password at any time. One of the things that this does is this actually downloads all of the individual master data tables that are being used. It initially will turn off calculations and then turn calculations back on and then do a refresh of any of the pivot tables. It's been done to actually improve and optimize the performance of the download. Downloads typically usually take less than a minute to download and refresh all data per individual workbook. Now the number 7 strategy is about sharing and presenting information. We believe that visibility drives accountability. So your team needs to have some visibility in the information, but you may not want to share the full workbook with them. We've outlined in terms of previous webinars how you can use the link capability to link Excel, graphs, and information directly into PowerPoint, which is a standard for presentation purposes. So you go into your weekly meeting and all the information is directly updated and ready for its use. We also have our client workbooks where we show a new way in which you can share information directly from the workbooks for clients to see. And let's take a look at that. When our IT service providers saw the power of the performance dashboards for getting a feel for how they were doing with their own information, they wanted actually to provide the same type of information to their clients in terms of executive reports. So we created a client workbook which provides an output determined in terms of a explore screen where you choose what you want to actually provide. You'll choose an individual company and you choose to create a client report. The client report provides a form where you choose what sections you want to include in the report, if you're using SLAs or closed tickets or new tickets or survey results. And the difference in terms of the output is that when you say create the report actually will create a PDF file based on the data that's actually on the various tabs of the workbook. A new tickets tab, a completed tab, an SLA first tab. It creates a PDF in a specified folder and presents it for use. And here is a client service report that someone can go out to their client with and show information about how that individual client did in terms of tickets created, time of day that they created new tickets, who was creating tickets, from what queues, by what resources. It includes a lot of information that basically tells a story of the type of service that's been provided to that client, but also allows them to focus in on changes that the client can make to get better service based on the time of day that they're submitting or how they're submitting the information, or drilling into specific survey information in terms of responses, looking at how certain resolution periods have been done, what was going on in terms of survey results for individuals, talking about performance for individual employees and who submitted what types of tickets, and even getting down to things like configuration level information where you could take a look at how individual items performed in terms of configuration data types. Our clients are using this report to differentiate themselves from other IT service providers. And we have one bonus secret, and that secret is to build your BI solution on Excel. Excel, SQL Server, SharePoint, PowerPoint. Excel is used by business people around the world for business data and for graphs and for analysis. And the power of the BI tools is extraordinary. It's just rock solid. It works and it's fast. It's easy to develop in, and that's why we're continuing to build out our portfolio in terms of business intelligence and performance dashboards on this framework. And in summary, we have 7 strategies for awesome dashboards. The first is full visibility. You want to use a portfolio of charts so that they can see more information than they ever wanted to see. You need metrics that matter, so at a glance you can see whether you're on track or off track. You want explore screens where you can slice information to actually understand the why of what's going on with your business. You want your users to be able to easily change their criteria for self-service business intelligence. It needs to be easy to set up in minutes rather than days. Your users want one click to refresh and have that refresh nearly instant. And finally, easily be able to share and present the information. So I'd like to thank you for your time. I'd like to thank you for using Autotask in the workbooks. And I'm wishing you much success as you dive into business intelligence. Thank you.